What's up, STS Nation, and welcome to another episode of Surviving the Survivor, the podcast that promises to bring you the very best guests in all of true crime. And you are in for a treat today, especially if you're interested in getting, I don't know how interested you are in this, but in getting inside the mind of Lori Vallow Daybell. We've got two phenomenal guests for that, and we've got another amazing investigator. We've had a bunch of investigators on, former investigators on this week, and they are bringing amazing perspective to a super wild and wacky story. As we know, it is now week 6 of the Lori Vallow Daybell trial. Each side told Judge Boyce that they rest their case. The defense called no witnesses, prompting an obvious question that we're going to get into. Is Lori Vallow's crimes, are Lori Vallow's crimes indefensible? Closing arguments are expected to begin tomorrow, Thursday, and a lot of people are predicting a very fast deliberation and an even faster verdict. But it's hard to always judge what a jury is thinking. That's part of what we will be talking about tonight. It is the trial of the so-called Doomsday Mom, the wildly twisted story of a seemingly loving mother, a self-proclaimed devout member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, who clearly veered way off course and became involved in the deaths of as many as 5 people, including her very own children. Best guest, welcoming her back to the show, Dr. Ildiko Tabori. She was featured in the A&E documentary about another dysfunctional family, the Menendez Brothers, and that's how we met her. She received her Ph.D. in clinical psychology from the California School of Professional Psychology at Los Angeles back in 2003, and has been a practicing licensed psychologist and neuropsychologist since 2004. And she's the therapist to comedians in Hollywood. Imagine that. Dr. Roger Rhoades is a senior therapist at the P.A.C.E. Center in Greenville, South Carolina, specializing in dysfunctional relationships. He's looking pretty frozen at the moment, so I hope he unfreezes. And he has worked with inmates inside the prison system, so he can give us some perspective on that. And last but certainly not least, and the first time to Surviving the Survivor, and very glad to have him, Jim Eggleston is a retired FBI special agent for more than 27 years. He maintained a top secret security clearance with special access to sensitive, compartmentalized information. Jim was one of the original members of the Arizona Child Abduction Response Team and also a member of the FBI's National Child Abduction Rapid Deployment Team. And I believe some of these teams were used to try to find JJ and Tylee, which we're going to ask him about. He is now the founder and owner of Baseline Investigations. Quick reminder, you can follow us on Facebook, Insta, Twitter at Podcast STS. Patreon and YouTube memberships are available to support us. The merch store is open, and my lovely mom, Carm, is doing a special meet and greet on May 18th for Patreon and YouTube members. Jim, to you first. First time on. Your overall perspective on this case. You're an investigator for 27 years with the FBI. You've seen and done it all. Where does this rank?
So I didn't follow this particular case closely in the news like I do with a lot of cases, but I certainly am very aware of it. And this falls into one of the categories that we learned about as investigators with specialized training and experience in child abductions. This would have fallen under the category of what we would call a FACA case, F-A-C-A, false allegation of child abduction. And basically, whenever you have a missing child case, unfortunately, one of the first groups of people that you look at are the family members or the caretakers who are responsible for that child. And while trying to support them and without being accusatory, you want to get their statements down very quickly. First, because they should have the most recent, most valuable information about the child's behavior, conduct, what they were wearing, where they should have been, when did they disappear, when were they last seen. But also you want to start kind of looking at them as possible suspects. And with this particular case, there were a lot of red flags that were raised that fall right in line with what we see in a FACA case. The children were not reported missing for a long period of time. The report of where they were turned out to be false. The conduct of the family, while you can never really read too much into somebody's conduct, everybody responds to grief and trauma differently. But when Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell were contacted in Hawaii and notified and served with the papers to produce information about the children, their response was pretty cavalier from what I saw. So those are the types of things that, to me, based on my experience, based on my training, really stood out about this particular case.
And since I have you right now, Chandler PD, which is close to where you are in the Phoenix area, they are taking heat because Charles Vallow sort of blew the proverbial whistle. You see him on body cam footage basically saying he fears for his life, and then wound up dead after that. Right. In any way, I am very pro law enforcement. Let me start there. But do you think in any way that the ball was dropped here because these kids seem to be missing for a very long amount of time before any real action was taken?
Well, so Chandler Police Department is a very good agency. I've worked directly with a lot of their investigators over the years. They were also members of the Arizona CART team, the Child Abduction Response Team. I worked with them on a task force also involving child victims of prostitution and internet exploitation. So they're a very good agency with a lot of very good dedicated investigators. Regarding your particular question, one of my questions would be, when that homicide took place, did they go back as an agency, did they go back and look at prior calls for service, either involving him or his address or the people around him? That would be something that in best circumstances should have been done. Depending on how his death was reported and how first officers responding to that reacted to it, that may have been overlooked. But that would have been something that ideally should have been done. And what that would have done would have been to recall those calls that he made to police, the contacts that he had with police where he reported his concerns and suspicions. That might have led to a different path for that investigation.
And forgive me, because you may have said this in your opening salvo, but the Arizona Child Abduction Response Team, this CHART team, were they deployed for JJ and Tylee in this case?
I don't know specifically about that. This is something that typically the AZ CART team would have been involved in, and definitely the FBI CARD team on a national level. But in both cases, those teams are only activated when the agency responsible for the initial investigation requests assistance. It's not something that the FBI or the AZ CART team goes and tries to, start their own investigation. They only respond to a request for assistance.
And I believe they were used, but I'd have to double check that, but I remember reading that. Dr. Ildiko Tabori, Catherine writes here, and this came up in yesterday's show, which I'm leading into right now. Joel, when your panelists talk about why we're interested in trials, I haven't heard them say this. It's looking for justice when people commit crimes. News just tells us about the crimes. Why is there this, incredible appetite for a case like the Lori Vallow Daybell trial or the Menendez brothers, which I know you were more focused on? They're very different, obviously, but why the thirst and the hunger from the public, regarding these types of cases?
I think we're looking for train wrecks. We see these pretty people who seem to be well adjusted in the world, and then all of a sudden there's this implosion of mess, and we're like rubbernecking like we do when we're passing a car accident on the road, and we're looking for anything dramatic, any blood, any guts, any crazy people running around in circles.
Dr. Raj, you're looking a little frozen, but your voice is there.
Okay, good.
Do you care to add to that? I mean, we've been talking about this. I've asked you this question before, but why this infatuation might be a strong word, but a definite voracious appetite for true crime and for trials. We just came off of Alec Murdoch, where I met you, and now we've got Lori Vallow Daybell. Why are people so invested in this?
Because they want to be the one who answers the question correctly. You know, we're not too far off of grade school. And so them being able to say, here's the answer, and be the correct answer, the feeling, the excitement of being the number one answer and it being correct. Wow. Then you're smarter than the FBI. You're smarter than therapists. You're smarter than the legal system. Who doesn't want to be smarter?
It's a lot of ego, but you're right, Raj. I feel like I'm about 13 years old, so I would have to agree with you on that. MC Spunky, hello, Joel and STS Nation, and YouTube's very best guest panelist, that is for sure. How long does everyone think jury deliberations will last? I don't want to put you right on the spot, Jim, since you're new to the show, but do you think this jury, which is set to hear closing arguments tomorrow, do you basically think that they have their minds made up already? You've been in the courtroom to provide testimony, but on the flip side, what do you think these jurors are thinking right about now?
Well, I think a couple things I'm certain of. They're probably very glad the trial is over. They're probably all hoping that they reach a unanimous decision quickly and not come up with some, combination or a hung type of jury. But I'm sure they're going to take the deliberations very seriously. And, for the time that this trial's been going on, they're not supposed to have talked to each other about the case. So this is going to be their first opportunity to discuss the case. And, I think my experience with jurors has been that they do take their responsibility seriously. And this was a long trial. A lot of information was presented. And I would expect them to go through it seriously and methodically, not necessarily rehash the entire case in detail, but I think discuss it in terms that would give anybody an opportunity to raise reasonable questions about what was presented, or was there anything left out, or is there any other explanation for X, Y, or Z? But I would think, based on the, sort of overwhelming information that was presented, that deliberations would probably take place over one, maybe two, maybe a little more than 2 days, and then they would return a return a verdict, I would think, within probably 2 days. Be a guess. It's a guess.
We'll interrupt this program for one moment for a public service announcement from Roger Rhoades. Susan Crone writes, once again, hello from Colorado. Under a tornado watch here, lots of thunder and lightning. Roger Rhoades is from Oklahoma, the capital of tornadoes.
Wait a minute, I'm going to help Susan here. You know what you call that? Spring. That's what it is. Oh, tornadoes. No, man. If you grow up in that, that's just every year. That's just part of the culture of that area. You find you a good bomb shelter. You get in that. You hope it's not about the actual bombs, but the tornado. And it's like a locomotive going by, and you hope it doesn't tear up your stuff. Yeah, but that's just, tornado. No, that's spring in that area.
We've got, speaking of Tornado Alley, we got Missouri, we've got Australia in the house, and here we've got London. So we are all set to go. It's an interesting question. I'm kind of, there was no court. Court was in session today, but they were speaking about jury instructions and the verdict sheet and all of that sort of stuff in court today. So we're going to go through some of the stuff over the last couple of days. One of them obviously relates to the next trial coming up, which would be Chad Daybell. To you, Dr. Ildiko Tabori, you always hear about this term in the world of psychology about enablers or co-enablers. Did these two just feed off each other and just feed into each other's egos and need to kind of run off into the Hawaiian sunset to be alone with each other?
Yeah, that's sure what it looks like. I mean, they meet and they're, ego one, ego two bouncing off of each other. The egos are at play in a very methodical way, in such a way that they're feeling superior. And if you look at all these interactions, I went back and watched the documentary over the weekend, and if you look back on all these police interactions with Lori Vallow, she's like, nothing can touch me. Nothing's going to happen. If somebody's coming at me saying that my child has disappeared, I'm like, oh my God, this is really scary. Or, my ex-husband just died or something like that. You're going to have an emotional reaction. She had no reaction other than this aura of self-confidence, like consistently. And anybody who is confident does deflate every now and then because we're human.
That's an excellent point. Raj, you can pick up on that. If they were kind of feeding off, it was like a feeding frenzy off of each other in a sense. But
yeah,
also,
you better be glad that they did catch him, because I guarantee you, if they wouldn't have, his life would have been on the ticker. I guarantee you. She had a history of taking out people. She would have taken him out. Luckily he gets to be in prison, is what I'm thinking, because she had the skill set of taking people out. He was next.
And do you think that Chad will have any hesitation about turning, knowing what we know about his personality, about turning on her, or do you think this love, which we'll get to in a little bit, was real? This quote unquote love, these lovebirds.
Are you asking me if it was real?
Yes, sir. Yes,
well,
sir.
Let me not only know, but hell no. No, I mean, those are two sick people, that liked each other. They liked themselves and they saw each other in the other person is what was going on. And, I think Chad's going to do what benefits Chad. I think that is the style of Chad. He's a user and she's a user. And anytime they get a chance of using something, they're going to do it. But love, wow, no, I think that would be a real jump, that either one was genuinely emotionally connected. No, they were users, and that's what you saw, and they do what benefits them. And I think at the core, what we see with Lori is she is so disconnected that she created her own reality. And so what you see her responding to is a reality she created in her head. That's what's going on. That's why she's so different, is because we expect her to respond like a regular human being would if their child was gone. Wait a minute, she hadn't been in the regular world for a while. But she lives every day in the Lori world. And I'm sure if they convict her, she's going to cry victim. Oh, they're persecuting me. Oh, they're wrong. La, la, la. That's why there's no defense put up, because how do you defend a made up reality? That's what you've got in her world. And so Chad, I think, is just going to come in and do what benefits Chad,
Yeah, Rod, your audio is beautiful. Your video, you're a little stuck, but that's all good. You'll unstuck yourself at some point. But do you think? So Jim seemed to think that the verdict deliberations could take up to 2 days. This person, Kimberly Allen from Toronto. Hello, Kimberly.
Yeah.
What's your prediction for a verdict here? Do you think these jurors already have their minds made up? Is it super quick?
Yes, there's just a mountain of evidence. And I totally agreed with Jim, man. I thought the timing, I would have said the same thing. If they're really on the move, they're going to do it Friday, so they don't have to spend the weekend and all this. If not, if they really want to look serious, then they're going to go over the weekend. But, I think they're going to be hard pressed not to just say she's guilty.
Yeah, I would have to agree with you. Barbara Ruel says, Dr. Tabori, less than 2 hours of deliberation, in my opinion, so incredibly incriminating, and no emotion nor remorse from Miss Lori Vallow Daybell, life without parole verdict. Do you agree with that, Dr. Tabori?
I think what we learned from the OJ case is that we're not going to do a 2-hour deliberation, maybe a 2-day deliberation. I think I agree with you on the Friday thing, Friday close of business, or maybe lunch. But yeah, 2 hours, no. I think they're going to give it their effort. There's a mountain of evidence in the prosecution. There's nothing in the defense. To be a fly on the wall in the attorney room for the defense, I'd be really interested in hearing that, because you want to put up a defense and she's probably going, no, they didn't prove their case.
Right. I would love to be a fly on Lori's mental wall is where I'd like to be. Don't you know, that is weird 101 right there, man.
I'd be terrified. That sounds like a horror movie to me. Lisa Rumsey says, I hope Larry and Chad like toast, because that's what they're going to be, followed by, on a more serious note, from Tali, who watches us in Israel. Hi, Joel, STS family, and best guest. Love Dr. Roger. What's not to love? He is the future Dr. Phil. Dr. Phil wishes he was Dr. Raj. It's going to be a great show. A small relief from the madness in Israel. Dr. Roger, words, woo-wee.
Buddy, get down. I like Larry the Cable Guy on this trial. Get her done.
I smell a new STS shirt coming out soon with it woo-wee on it. Jim's like, what have I gotten myself into here? But there's madness brewing in Israel, by the way. So hopefully things stay calm there as missiles are flying back and forth. Jim, to you, I'm always intrigued by this. So I'm sure you've covered high-profile cases. You were there too long not to have done that. What is it like for investigators to, pull up to a scene like this that they found in Rexburg, Idaho, where these two young bodies were there? And how are things amplified knowing that there are children involved and murdered and brutalized in the most horrific way?
Yeah, those are horrible scenes to deal with. And I can tell you from personal experience and from working with, very dedicated professionals over the years, those scenes are treated with respect for the deceased, respect for the surviving family members, and knowing that everything you do is going to be scrutinized, 10 different ways by hundreds of different people over a period of, sometimes years. And you've got one chance at that crime scene to get it right. So, there's the physical process of making sure you secure the crime scene, taking notes of who's coming and going, all of that. You want to get the best people and best equipment possible to get the scene to actually look for the evidence. Sometimes that means slowing things down a little bit and waiting instead of, if you discover a crime scene like that late in the evening, you don't want to start working on it that night. You want to secure the crime scene and bring in a good team with the right equipment and start working on it the next day. Sometimes the weather plays into that as well. But as far as just the, emotional and mental aspects of it, at the time you're in that, you're 100% focused on what you're doing and you want to do it right. And again, you do it with a certain amount of reverence to the victim. But afterwards, I think that's when it hits you more on a personal level. It's such a busy period of time when you deal with something like that, because everybody thinks about what they show on TV and the movies. You're out there processing a crime scene. You're looking for that, key piece like the hair, the hair in this particular case, which I thought was fascinating, and the way it was wrapped in the tape, which to me tells even more of a story than it was just there. It's where that hair was. So excellent work on that particular piece of it. But, as you're going through all of that, people forget when you get back to the office, you've just started, because now you have to document and log all of that evidence and do that properly and write a detailed report about what took place during that part of the investigation, and then follow up with lab reports and other specialized reports, tire print analysis, shoe print analysis. Not saying that any of that came into play in this particular case, but those are all things that you look for as you approach a crime scene. Those are all things that have to be preserved and documented one way or another. And then, like I say, you have to do the follow-up afterwards to link those pieces of evidence to a suspect.
And when you're flipping through the metaphoric picture book of your career over 27 years, do you stop on the pages where you see the pictures of those kids over the years that have been victimized? Are those the ones that kind of stick with you? That's what I've heard from investigators.
Sure. Anytime that you're dealing with a crime of violence and you see what happens to a human body, and you wonder, how could somebody do this to another person, and especially a child? How could somebody commit an act of violence against a child? And then when that's the person who's supposed to be their caretaker, supposed to be responsible for them, you just can't imagine how somebody lets themselves get to that state of mind for what, in this particular case, an insurance payout. It's unbelievable. And one of the things that I've always said to my colleagues over the years is, we try to, when we're investigating a case, when you're looking at what happened, we're trying to apply rational thought to somebody who's irrational. So it's hard to put yourself in that person's point of, mindset to understand how they do it. And in a lot of cases, that's important, but that's, motive is never has to be proven to prove guilt. Mm-hmm. So at the crime scene, you're really focused on the mechanics of it, like I say, and getting that right. It's later when you do have to deal with it personally and process those images. And yeah, there's certainly cases from my career that, will always stay with me. And I just hope that in those cases, I did the best that I could to help resolve the matter and bring closure to a family and bring justice for the victim and to the person who did it.
And I'm glad Jim mentioned the hair. We'll circle back on that and get his perspective, because that is arguably the most important single piece of evidence in this case. To you, Dr. Tabori from TGQ, question, is Lori a textbook narcissist? This goes, by the way, with the caveat that neither Dr. Tabori nor Dr. Rhoades have personally met Lori Vallow, but they know enough about her. So how would you answer that, Dr. Tabori?
Again, not having met her, not able to fully diagnose her. This is just solely based on observations. She doesn't strike me as a narcissist. She does strike me as somebody with a delusional disorder, very depersonalized in the world, where she is disconnected from everybody else's reality. Again, like what you were saying before, she is living in her own reality. And that reality is maybe narcissistic on some level, that, we are above and more spiritual than the rest of the world. But she herself doesn't strike me as truly personality disordered. Traits, sure. Personality disorder, not so much.
Dr. Raj, how would you diagnose
Wait
her?
a minute. I want to jump in there. I totally agree with you. It is not narcissism. She's delusional. And what I'm thinking about, unless you get an investigator that's mentally ill, then you've got a good connect. But if you're trying to look at this from a normal, healthy thought pattern, it's not going to compute. That's where she's counting on the doubt issue. That she's got her own narrative, and she thinks nobody's going to be able to guess it because it's my own personal narrative. And that's her illness. Certainly, can she show traits of things? Yeah. But is that the main lane she's driving in mentally? No. She's driving in I've made up a story. I totally have bought it, and I'm just seeing if you guys can guess it. And if you don't think she's sitting in jail thinking about beating the FBI, you have lost it. That's what I guarantee you, that has emotionally jacking her up. I'm going to beat those clowns, is what she's thinking, because she's not well.
And Raj, do you think at this very moment that she could still be believing that she will get off?
Yes. And because It has to do with her belief of narrative. She's created this story. If you brought a Bible to her and asked her to put her hand up and say, do you swear that this is the truth, nothing but the truth, holy truth? I guarantee you she would pass. Why? Because that's what she believed. She genuinely believes it to the bottom of her heart. But it's not the truth. And there's the disconnect. People are trying to evaluate her based on quote unquote justice, quote unquote fairness. Yeah, that's the judicial system, thank God, but it doesn't apply to Nutty. It doesn't apply to Nutty. It applies to, here we've got a rational person, and here we're being judged by rational people, and we're making a rational decision. Wow, that isn't happening in this world. Not with Lori. No, she's nutty. She's looking to beat everybody else with her nuttiness.
Knightwood writes, Dr. Tabori, is that a Hail Mary the defense just played? They basically rested without bringing a defense. My question to you, there was a moment yesterday where there were people thought Lori would in fact take the stand. Do you think she wishes she could take the stand? To Roger's point, do you think she believes that she can get in front of these jurors and convince them that she is fine and dandy, nothing to see here?
Oh yeah. I mean, I'm sure that that's what she wanted. And when she wasn't getting her way, that's when, the defense had to rest. But I'm sure that she wanted to get up there and explain away in her own, chaotic world, chaotic and vague world about what was happening, and not making any sense to anybody except for herself and maybe Chad.
Don't you think her defense team listened to what she wanted to say and said, I don't think so?
I'm going to agree with you on that one.
Yeah, I'm thinking, man, Murdaugh thought he could play that, and he was a seasoned attorney, and he turned out to be the fool. I think they took a lesson from that and said, ooh-wee, they got to hear what we wish we could have heard, and I think they went, oh no. This would be you talk about open and shut. I think her power in all this is that they can't get her reality, and I think her team thinks that's how she's going to get off. There's going to be somebody in there that says, well, since there's doubt in the reality, we can't convict her.
And I'm sure she's in her own head thinking that it makes perfect sense, but not to anybody else.
Sense. Wow. I love that. Perfect sense to Nuttyville. Wow. That's a tough get. That's a tough get. Yeah. Do I get a nut? No. That's how I function in the world, is not to get nutty and not to be nutty. Yeah.
Hey, Jim, Barbara Kern writes, does the FBI agent, his name is Jim Eggleston, does he believe that there could be more arrests made in the Daybell case? Surely many other people were involved in this horrific crime. There is a question that her circle of friends probably didn't commit crimes, but they didn't raise many red flags when given the opportunities to do so. But the thing that has floored me, one of the things the most, is that the defense here didn't throw Alex Cox, the brother, under the bus. His phone, at least, is present at almost every crime scene, murder scene, if not all of them. And he's dead. He allegedly died of natural causes. Some people question that, but he's been cremated, so I don't think we will ever know. But it's amazing to me, and I'm curious, your reaction to it, that the defense did not try to throw him under the bus and point the finger and say, look, Lori might be crazy, but her brother did all of this. Why don't you think that was used at all?
Yeah, again, I apologize because I have not followed the details of this case closely, but, to kind of speak to that particular issue, I might not be able to address that. As far as any of her friends who should have raised a red flag, there's a big difference between what somebody should have ethically done, morally done, the right thing to do versus what are they legally accountable for? And unless they had guilty knowledge of her behavior, unless they had, something substantial that should have compelled them to go forward to law enforcement, I don't see anybody else being charged. The other reason I don't see anybody else being charged at this point, and maybe I'm completely wrong, because again, I haven't followed the case in detail, but I would think that just as a strategy, if you had somebody else that was, had some type of involvement or knowledge, like I say, guilty knowledge of what had happened, I would have thought that that person would have been brought forward at trial as a witness, right? And through some type of a deal, been given the opportunity to testify in lieu of being prosecuted or for a reduced charge, that type of scenario.
And Jim, what's it like for you? Because you obviously come from a totally different place and a different perspective, but what is it like specifically for you to watch these high profile cases? Are you looking at how investigators investigated? I know from my own personal experience, for example, when I'm watching broadcast news, I'm thinking, wow, that was a horrible question. Or, wow, they could have said that in 3 words instead of 15 words.
Right.
So how do you, what is your lens that you look through these cases?
Yeah, I guess ever since I was little, I have always been interested in these things from the perspective of wanting to solve it, wanting to help do the right thing, wanting to help people. That's one of the reasons I got into law enforcement in the first place. So I watch these things now because I just have a natural curiosity for it. I spent 28 years of my life in law enforcement. I'm still involved, as a licensed private investigator. I do a lot of work for missing persons to try to help people out. And I always learn something from these cases. So, I wouldn't say that I watch to critique the work of other people so much. I learn from what other people do, good and bad, and try to apply that to the business that I'm still involved in, try to build on my experience and knowledge, and always try to improve my own work, right? I can always learn from my own past mistakes. But it's really, natural curiosity, and then just wanting to stay current, wanting to stay involved. Technology is always changing. Technology plays a larger and larger role in every type of criminal investigation these days than it did when I started my career way back when. So you have to stay current, try to stay current, keep learning, and evolve with those different scenarios.
If I was a college graduate and I said, Mr. Eggleston, what do I need to do to be a great FBI agent? What's your answer?
It's, hopefully our environment changes, because right now it's difficult to encourage young people to go into law enforcement. We used to be, I think, more appreciated than now. So I applaud the men and women who are still out there in whatever capacity, trying to help society, trying to do the right thing. But I think the answer that I used to give people when I was asked that question, I would generally suggest don't get a degree in criminal justice, because you're kind of narrowing your field. Pursue the things that truly interest you, and pursue something that could be applied more broadly. A lot of police departments and federal law enforcement agencies see people coming through with, kind of that same background, and you want to stand out. You want to have some other skill set. With the FBI, there's a variety of things that people can do to enhance their chances of being selected during the hiring process. And, language skills, computer skills, those are all things that, like I say, always play a role. Law degrees, accounting degrees, those have always been high priorities for the FBI. But just, I think young people should pursue the things that interest them and pursue the things that give them the widest opportunities for success once they start their career.
And our society needs to get back to appreciating and respecting law enforcement. It's a very, very difficult job. That's my 2 cents. Bobby Henson writes, love your crib, Dr. Tabori, Trey Chic. Followed by Oregon, Southern Oregon, and then we've got Mississippi in the house. We've got everyone here, even Wyoming. And someone is asking, is Roger awake? Roger is one of the most caffeinated people I know. It's just his Wi-Fi
Let's tell it like it is. I got a whole lot of giddy up and not much whoa. That's where I grew up.
Dr. Roger Rhoades needs an entire line of graphic T-shirts with his sayings, and I'm going to make sure that happens. I'm telling you, this guy is the next Dr. Phil, so Dr. Phil better be nervous. Hello from New Hampshire, says Roger is in the portal, and then we've got, of course, Papa Bear, who holds a special place in my heart. She's in Moscow, Idaho, now the infamous home to those 4 horrific homicides at the hands of the accused suspect, Brian Kohberger. So back to Lori, and I think we're going to hear some of the same things, but I'm curious about different aspects. And then we'll get into some of the text messages, which are quite amusing, to say the least. But Dr. Tabori, one of the things that we've seen juxtaposed with horrific images and very embarrassing text messages, we get Lori Vallow, reports of Lori Vallow in the courtroom, and she is laughing or joking with her attorneys. If that was me, God forbid, and I am accused of killing my children, I am mortified, possibly suicidal, unbelievably depressed. Why do we see the laughter? Why do we see the giggling? Why do we see this kind of like nervous, weird energy coming from her?
Well, because she's kind of nervous and weird, right? I mean, there is that disconnect. I mean, it's like this reality. She's in this jail, in this county jail, wherever that is, and you know, the county jails aren't great. I started my career in the LA County Jail, and you know, it's not pleasant in there. And now she gets to go to court, and there's movie or TV cameras in there, and you know, she is in her own little movie. And yeah, it's that disconnect. She's laughing. She's not serious. You know, her kids are dead and she's laughing. Makes no sense.
Absolutely not. Robin says hello from Idaho, obviously a state that is on our minds between Kohberger and this. Marshall Dove, hey, STS Nation. And then we've got Miss We Lassie, cozy in bed in Scotland, lest you think we are not a global show. We go from Scotland to the Oregon coast. Technology is truly amazing. And someone asking right here, look at this, from Tina Mindful, Ildiko, does this name come from Hungary? Would you care to answer that?
It does come from Hungary, although in every other part of the world other than Hungary, I am a Japanese man, because that's what everybody thinks my name is. And as your mom knows, and has she pronounced my name properly,
right
it
here,
is Hungarian.
My mother speaks 6 languages, bless her heart, and she's told she has a Hungarian accent in all of them. So
she has one completely.
Yeah,
the most useful language in the world.
She pronounced it on the money, though, right?
Oh yeah, perfectly, much better than I can.
Jim, so back to this hair that you mentioned, and you talked about how it kind of tells a story. I'd love for you to elaborate on it. Of course, we're talking about this hair that was found on a bag on duct tape, used to basically hide and hold J.J. Vallow's body. So tell us about this hair and how important it is.
Well, the fact that a hair was found at all is very important. And, you know, there are obviously other explanations for how that hair got there, but it certainly helps make a physical connection that up until that point, I believe, was lacking. But the actual placement of the hair, the way it was found, if I understand it correctly, wrapped in the tape itself that was used to, you know, wrap the body in the bag, that to me shows that that hair wound up there during the process of disposing of the body, rather than had the hair been inside the bag and could have been from, you know, could have been, I believe, much more easily explained by the defense if the hair had been in the bag, for example, because that could be from, you know, prior contact. That's his mother, after all. Whether she was present or not, you could make the argument that, well, the hair was from the couch and transferred to his body and so forth. But when that hair is actually wrapped in the tape that's used to wrap the body for disposal, that's a whole different time frame. That's a whole different set of circumstances. So to me, that's why I think it held a great deal of significance in this case.
And then Janet follows up here. By the way, someone is telling me that CART was not deployed because they were just missing too long, so they were not deployed. I have not confirmed that, but that's what Aries Athena is telling me. So I will go with what she is saying.
That would make sense. Sure.
Yeah. Janet, though, says, question, this one obviously is for Jim. Chandler law enforcement only interviewed Lori and Alex one time, never went back, didn't even look up Alex's prior, which prohibited him as a felon to own a firearm. Would you call that dropping the ball? I would. Jim, I know it puts you in a weird spot because you still, I'm sure, are friendly with guys there, but just curious, kind of broadly, again, knowing this, does it change your thinking about how they handled the situation?
Well, so I don't want to, I'm not dodging the question because of, prior continuing contacts, because I like to call it the way I see it, but I will defer that question just because I really don't have the background on that, information. If you're interested in having me back sometime, maybe I can get up to speed on that, and I'd be happy to comment on it one way or another. And, mistakes are made. I look back at some of the cases I worked over the years, and the cases that didn't get solved haunt me because I always ask myself, did I miss something? Could I have done more? Was I not focused on the right thing? So, even if you are critical or ask questions about an investigation, it's not done to tear down that agency. It's done to try to get things better the next time, I guess.
We forget the idea. Hindsight is 20/20. Everybody's an expert when they're after the fact, but they weren't there. They weren't in the midst. And let me tell you, sometimes I am fascinated by what you guys do under the circumstances you do it. It's almost superhuman. It's like, how in the world did they come up with that? Imagine being able to find the hair in the tape and analyze it. Wow. That's beyond the pale right there.
Yeah, and as someone pointed out, I mean, Rexburg PD, who I believe found it, very small jurisdiction. We heard a lot of criticism aimed at the Moscow PD ahead of the arrest of Brian Kohberger, and it turned out they did really good, from what we can tell, investigative work. They kept their chin down and their nose to the grindstone, and it looks, at least right now, like it paid off. Obviously, there's a presumption of innocence, but already a lot of evidence pointing negatively towards Brian Kohberger in that case. Big thanks to Stephanie Ella for the super sticker. Love that. Appreciate it. Someone responded to the earlier questions I asked the doctors about. Bethany Joy says, we care about this trial because 5 of our citizens are deceased, and probably no better reason to care about it than that. I'm curious to get all 3 of your guys and women's perspective on this. So part of the drama yesterday, we found out that Judge Boyce issued an order saying that now the verdict will be live streamed when it is read. Dr. Tabori, the judge had taken some criticism for not having cameras in this courtroom, denying certain motions for transparency. People said he wasn't being transparent. Do you believe, first of all, that, and I know, this comes from your perspective, you're not an attorney, obviously, but just do you feel that there should be cameras in public courtrooms? And is this the right decision to read this verdict publicly?
Yeah, I'm kind of mixed on that one. Courts are public forums, and so we have a right to go in there and watch these things. On the flip side, as we saw with the Menendez case and with every, huge case, OJ and going back to Charles Manson, just how the media interprets what's being done, what's being said. Oh, look at that little smirk. Look at that, color of lipstick that she's wearing. Does that mean she's crazy because it's hot pink? Who knows? So yeah, I'm a little bit mixed on that. I don't know, I doubt people are going to riot because of this, but it's definitely going to, cause some, heartache on some level.
Ann Vroom is a friend of the show. We always take everyone's perspective here. I think the negative take on public interest, characterizing the public as bloodthirsty or childish, which both Raj and I kind of agreed about a little bit, is a rather arrogant, misconstrual. People are primarily interested in seeing justice done. Not to speak for Raj, but I will. But I think what Raj was saying is it's sort of a base instinct of humanity to try to solve these puzzles. Raj, is that correct?
No doubt about it. And somehow we think that we're so mature when we grow up. And in an instant, you draw back to 13 years old. Come on now. Quit trying to be such a super adult or thinking a super adult thinking. No, we're basically kids at heart. And so if an accident happens, you're going to slow down. You're going to look at it. It's going to have a certain basic appeal to it. And who doesn't have an appeal of having an answer, being first, and being right? Man, those are just base payoffs for people. I mean, they don't have to have an ulterior motive to have a childish desire. Come on. Yeah, sometimes we dig a deep hole when all we need to do is dig a deep.
Well, I'll tell you, I take a lot of pride in being a very mediocre, average adult. Dr. Tabor, you wanted to add something to that?
Yeah, I mean, look, it would be nice to say that we're constantly looking to seek justice, because justice always prevails when it goes in our favor, and justice wasn't served when it doesn't go in our favor, right? Whatever that may be. But, the basis of it, really, we're seeking punishment. We're seeking punitive punishment, not necessarily justice. Sometimes those match up, sometimes those don't.
Jim, to you, I'm curious because you were in law enforcement and you had to testify at times. Do you think there should be transparency in the court system? Should there be cameras in courts? And are you pleased that they're going to be at least reading this verdict on a live stream?
Yeah, that is a very interesting question. On the one hand, obviously, the public has an absolute right to be able to, see what's going on in the courtroom. But to have cameras in the courtroom, I think, can change the dynamic. Think about a witness, for example, in this case, maybe one of Lori's friends who testified, I believe, right? And how difficult that is in the first place to get up and testify against somebody that you knew as a friend. And you're doing it in a public forum, but then you add the aspect of a camera, and then you add the aspect of knowing or wondering how far that camera reaches out into the public. And I think it just adds a new level of stress for witnesses. And I also think it can change people's focus and demeanor. And, people tend to play to the camera rather than be themselves or respond directly to the either prosecutor or defense attorney asking the questions. And, it's kind of a double-edged sword. I don't have a good answer for it, obviously. I absolutely understand and respect the public's interest in being able to watch these things. But I also think it's one of the cores of our society. It's such an important facet of our society to have justice done as well as it can be done, that we shouldn't introduce outside influences that might skew it a little bit.
Well, Jim, wait a minute, let me just interject.
Sure. Film
never dies. Okay. The fact that the other doctor was saying Manson and OJ, Lord help me, think how long ago that was and what age we were when that happened. And you can watch that go on today. So imagine a friend saying something that if there's no cameras, I say it's in the ether. I don't have to think about it again. But if we put cameras in, 20 years ago, you could pull me up saying that. Wow, boy, the repercussions, the waves of the rock hitting go on forever. And that cannot be minimized in this issue of cameras in the courts.
And that's interesting. And one of the things they said, because they are releasing audio of the court proceedings, but they did say that they are not going to preserve the audio. So basically, when this trial is over, everything goes into the ground. except for the reading of this verdict, as far as what we were told. But Vix Tech, this is interesting. And Dr. Raj, I'll throw this to you. So Chad's got older children. Question is, I wonder what Chad's kids are thinking. Any idea if you had to postulate a guess here?
Sadness.
Okay.
That's what I would postulate. Thank goodness they're alive, and and Lori didn't have it out for any of them. They weren't ever seen as a liability. Yay. But are they ever going to stop loving their dad? And the answer is no. And are they sad that he is involved in this messy situation? Yeah. So I think that's what they're going to carry with them throughout this is how in the world can they be anti their dad, and when are they ever going to stop loving their dad? I think are the key thoughts in those kids' minds.
And Collier Landry, who made headlines years ago, his father was a physician in a small town in Ohio, Mansfield, Ohio, and he murdered his mother. And Collier had us on his podcast. It's called Moving Past Trauma, which is amazing. And he's got a show called Survivor Squad out now. And he had us on his podcast, and I have a very bad habit of taking over other people's podcasts. And I asked him, his father's in prison, turning 80. I said, do you still love your dad? And he didn't miss a beat. He's like, I love my dad, but Bingo. Yeah, but he said he's a psychopath and a sociopath, but he's my flesh and blood. And it's giving me the chills right now because the father tells him back that he loves him, but it's obviously, everything that they've had to endure, and he's still a complete narcissist and refuses to admit what he did to the mother with overwhelming evidence, still trying to skate around it. So, it's difficult. And obviously I'm not in those shoes, but it was interesting to hear that. The Trip Show says, this is the fun part of the show. I'll tell you what the jurors are thinking right now. Lori brings a whole new meaning to Riders on the Storm. For those of you who don't know what the storm is, we'll get to the storm in a minute. I like to save that for the end of the show, so not too many people blush. But before we get there, Jim, this kind of came up earlier. Any doubt that if Lori and Chad were still free, that other people's bodies would show up, possibly even Chad's body, if they were still out and about?
Yeah, I think, based on what we know from the trial and based on speculation about all the other people around them that wound up meeting a bad demise, I think Dr. Rhoades hit it, right on the head when he said that this might have saved Chad's life, right?
Amen.
Right.
Don't think the clock wasn't ticking on that dude.
Right.
It was. His expiration date was written down in her head.
Yeah, one or the other, you would think would be at risk of disappearing because they held each other's secrets. And once you got rid of the other, then, that would make the survivor less likely to wind up where they are right now. So I would have been very reluctant to become somebody named on an insurance policy in that type of a relationship. For sure.
That's right.
And Jim, what do you think the motive here? So at the during opening statements, the state said it's all about money, sex, power. But do you think, because you mentioned it a couple of times, do you think the motive was financial more than anything else here, outside of all the crazy cray?
Well, again, without having really followed this case, but money is the component. Money is a component of freedom. So I think what it was really about was, in their minds, and both the doctors have talked to their state of mind, especially Lori's state of mind. But this whole process of getting rid of the children and acquiring the money and getting rid of the wife if they were involved in that and acquiring the money, it's all a quest for freedom. The money gives them freedom to move about and live the type of life that they aspire to. And in going back to one of the first things that you asked me to talk about was my experience with the false allegation of child abductions, those types of cases. One of the things that you look for in those types of investigations are if the child is missing or the victim of a crime, did that child pose some type of an impediment to the relationship? Was that child a drag on the family because of a learning problem or disability? Did that child create friction between the spouses? So getting rid of the children, getting the money, that's all a part of getting more freedom, I guess, is how I would summarize it.
Lindsay Shea, what's up, SDS Nation? Jersey girl here. She knows I'm from Jersey. Huge Dr. Raj fan. I can't do it, but it's close enough. This is interesting, Dr. Raj, to you. WD-40, guilty just in time for Mother's Day, priceless. Do you think if she is convicted and she is sitting in jail and hasn't been moved to prison or is already in prison on Sunday, do you think she'll reflect on being a poor mother?
No, she'll talk to her about appeal. She's already planning on that if something goes wrong. I guarantee you, does not believe they'll convict her. She's done all this in her own narrative, and her own narrative is like a Disney movie. She's nutty. Come on now. No, you just can't play out how she's going to go. But I guarantee you, whatever she does, it will be pro Lori. She will take everything as her as the victim and that people don't understand. That I guarantee you, that's what you'll hear. Poor me, and you guys don't understand.
I'm right there with you on that one.
Yeah. Angela, by the way, writes tornadoes in Arkansas, and Arkansas. Whoever that was in Colorado, let us know that you're okay, so Dr. Raj doesn't have to worry tonight. Sally Vella, Dr. Tabori, to you. Chad left a breadcrumb of evidence for the FBI to use of when, where, and who by his text. He's going to use Lori as the mastermind, and he was controlled by sex. Do you think that this is a plausible defense? Do you think that, and I know you're not an attorney, but just using kind of, logic from what we have learned about this case, do you think that could happen? Or is he going to say to his attorneys, I am so in love with this sex goddess of mine that I don't want to throw her under the bus in any way?
Yeah, that's also a good question. When you get some space from your sex goddess, you start to realize she's not that much of a sex goddess to begin with. Depending on how much this egotistical man wants to spend time in jail, he's going to throw whatever he can, whatever defense he can at the wall and see what sticks. And if that's what sticks, then that's what sticks.
No. I think they're talking about, will she have a reaction? No reaction because she was part of it and knew all about it. It's kind of an interesting question. If she's convicted, Dr. Raj, will we see emotion from her? Will we see tears? And if we do see tears, are those tears for herself?
Well, if you see any reaction or any tears, you will have to frame it in the narrative of Lori. Here's the problem is people are trying to normalize to say, well, once they say she's guilty, she's going to come to a reckoning. They're delusional. That's not the case. No, my thinking is this is a continuation. I would think she's thinking about where can I get tried again where I can be on camera.
Dog Mom, right on cue. Love Dr. Roger. Ellen, look at this. He's got a whole fan base now. I love Roger. He's perfect. Even that hair is perfect to his. And then right here, Christina Rayhill says, delighted to see Dr. Roger on the panel tonight. His slam dunk, let's cut to the chase, is so refreshing. And with that, I just took away the question I was going to ask of you, Dr. Tabori. So I'll go on to another question. And that has to do with jurors. So there were reports, by the way, that, they weren't talking to each other. They didn't know each other 6 weeks ago. And now they were laughing with each other, kind of fist bumping each other during the breaks yesterday. They're not allowed to talk about the case to each other. But what do you think, psychologically it is like to go down this road of being a juror where you're getting paid $5 or $10 a day? It's around that. And you are now kind of given a new family of sorts that you will be tied to for the rest of your life. What do you think that experience is like for these people?
Oh, I'm sure that, there is that level of connectedness that, they're the only ones who know what is going on with the other person. Nobody else in the world gets it, but they get it because they're experiencing it just like, their neighbor is. On that same note, they're listening to all this evidence. I'm sure not all of it is interesting for the last 6 weeks or however long this has been going on. And I'm sure it's overwhelming, and I'm sure it's exhausting, and I'm sure they want to get back to their regular lives. And you're dealing with the lives of human beings, and you're making a judgment call on that. So that does a lot on your psyche. It puts you into turmoil, puts you into this cognitive dissonance, kind of what we were talking about a little bit ago. It's, I can love my evil father and still not like his evil ways, right? This jury is like, we can judge this person and try to get some justice, but at the same time, it's, do I want to be responsible for putting this person away forever?
I remember the other question that one of the members of STS Nation had. You said they're not narcissists. You and Dr. Raj agreed about that, but someone wrote, are they two psychopaths? What about that, Dr. Tabori?
Kind of falls under the same category. Do they have tendencies towards that? Yeah, I mean, they killed people, of course. But I think it's more based on, a shared delusional disorder, what we used to call a folie à deux, which is a shared psychotic disorder.
Izzy Day, Dr. Raj, to you. I hope Chad Daybell pleads. The family has suffered enough. Do you think Chad Daybell is sitting in his jail cell and the number one concern right now is how the families are feeling or how Chad will fare?
Yes. Oh, he is sitting in jail, concerned about others. In what world is that going on? Come on. No, he's a Chadite, man. Hey, I'm only thinking about me. What about me? Not about this nutty, this love interest I had. And who doesn't understand it was all about sex? Yeah. He's all about whatever benefits him. That's what he's thinking about now. That's what he's doing now. That's his life course. So I think what we'll see after this is done, whether she's convicted or not, it will all be about what benefits him. Now, if he does something that doesn't benefit him to help her, wow, now that'll be a story. That'll be an interesting moment. That will be what we call out of character.
Salty cowgirl, thank you for this. I believe that Lori's smug and carefree attitude all through this trial, especially during the horrific testimony concerning the kids, will greatly affect the jury's verdict. Dr. Tabori, she might not be of sane mind and normal mind, but the jurors probably are. You think they're mortified by her reactions and the juxtaposition to what they are seeing and hearing?
Yeah, if they're not, they should be. I mean, it's a little odd. But again, I don't know what they're seeing from their POV here. We're seeing it from our perspective outside through the media. So that might be fleshed out in a way that they're not seeing it. But if they're seeing what we're seeing, sure. It makes me think, why didn't they go for a defense not guilty by reason of insanity?
They couldn't prove it is why. I guarantee you they were looking for it. They thought they could hook that. They couldn't catch that fish. That's the only reason they didn't do that.
Yeah.
And Dr. Raj gave a public service announcement regarding tornadoes. I will now ask for another one regarding parenthood. And kind of this comment caught me in a weird way. I have the best parents. My mother is a wonderful co-host. But Emily says, could you imagine having Chad and Lori as parents? I'm writing a book right now, as many people know, and it is advice from my Holocaust survivor / therapist / co-host mom. And we talked about parenting, and she had some interesting takes. But Dr. Raj,
Yeah.
if you have parents, you don't need a license for this. It's not like, when you go fishing or hunting, anyone can have parents, and there are a lot of crappy ones out there. So if you are, I don't know, depressed, anxious, angry, cynical because you feel like you have, pulled the horrible ticket in the lottery and you got the horrible parents, what sort of advice do you give someone if they think that their parents are horrendous? Because there are plenty of them out there.
Yeah. Create emotional space. Okay. Everybody at some point thinks their parents were idiots, and sometimes they feel like they're geniuses. But at the core, they love their parents because that's who they got in the lottery of parenthood. Okay. But if you're going to have if there were any children involved, you want to encourage them. What would need to happen to create physical and emotional space, and then help them build strong boundaries toward their parents? Because it's like it would be considered an emotional infection. You don't want these people to infect their children. And so that would be important, because if they're close, will they infect them? You bet. Lordy. Yeah.
I love that. Emotional infection. Do not be emotionally infected. I love that. The second public service announcement in just one show. Jim, back to you, and then we'll start to wind things up here. But you alluded to digital forensics, really changing the landscape. They went to the old iCloud and found a gazillion texts between Chad and Lori. And let me just frame one of them, which leads us into the storm, and then we'll wrap it up. But we hear about James and Elena. These are kind of alter egos of Lori and Chad. And Chad went obviously by James, Lori went by Elena, and it starts with them visiting a temple and returning to a hotel for quote unquote additional romance on the couch. They calm their nerves enough to give this is a quote now, to give each other a blessing. As James placed his hands on her head, he connected with Elena's true eternal self. He knew he was in the presence of an exalted goddess. Two questions for you. How important are these texts in terms of evidence? And secondly, as an investigator, you start combing through these. What are you thinking in your own mind?
Well, again, difficult to apply rational thought to somebody who's acting irrationally. And going back to what both the doctors have discussed already, the delusional, mindset of especially Lori. But they seem to have had this.
And Jim just froze.
Oh, did I freeze up?
No, you're good. You're good. It might have been me for a second. You're good.
But I think they certainly created a fantasy world, if not being totally delusional in their thought process. The text messages that I thought were more telling from an investigative standpoint were the text messages talking about the insurance policies and talking about how close somebody is to 0 or 100, and I guess that corresponds to their worth as a victim of a crime if the insurance pays out. From what I gathered from those text messages, I think those messages were more significant in terms of the investigation. Maybe they didn't reveal as much as about their mindset. In fact, those are more rational type of messages where somebody's motivated by the insurance policy, and that's why they commit the crime. So, the doctors might have a lot more insight into that fantasy world that those text messages where they took on those different personas and the things that played out.
And when Lori found out she was not getting the insurance money, I believe the quote was, "It feels like a spear was thrown through my heart." She was devastated by that. If I was a juror, and I'm not, that would be all I needed to hear. To Jim's point, that would be a guilty for me because it was all about the money, it sounds like. To you, and again, we'll wrap momentarily. First off, Dr. Tabori, you'll be the one to blush tonight. The FBI agent had the wonderful task of explaining to the jurors that the word storm was a euphemism for the word penis. And in this text, Chad says to Lori, I completely agree. We were definitely in new territory in your bedroom. Elena's magic hand has gripped the storm, barely able to breathe as intense waves wash over them.
What you mean is a small wind. Come on, let's get real. It wasn't a storm. It was a small gust.
It was no tornado, right?
No, absolutely not.
No,
It didn't ruffle anybody.
Listen, my mom, who went through the Holocaust, she says if you don't laugh, you got to have a sense of humor. I mean, it is so insane. But Joyce's comment following this is love and obsession are commonly mistaken for each other. Do you think that after the verdict for Lori Shallow instead of Vallow, that others will be brought up in charges? I mean, what about this notion of love versus obsession? And what do you make of this storm? I mean, these are grown-ass adults. To Roger's point, I mean, I guess there's a lot of arrested development out there. But Dr. Tabori, what's your take on this?
Oh, people of all ages confuse those two. Love, obsession, love and lust. You know, we meet somebody, we, love at first sight. No, how can you love somebody at first sight? It's lust at first sight, but it's not love. You don't know that person.
If you work for the Disney organization, you could.
The what organization?
The Disney organization.
Well, okay, yeah. Look where that's got women.
Hey, Raj, Aries Athena says, what was the most cringe part of the text messages for you? I'm not asking you that. She says, mine was cheek to cheek, loin to loin. I mean, Raj, what was going on in these exchanges? It is absolutely like humorous and insane all at once. But what was going on in your professional opinion?
Oh, my Lord. I think they knew how to feed each other emotionally or through verbalization. So anything they said, they thought would put wind in the sail of the other one and move the agenda forward. That's what was going on. They were, how do you talk about two sick people sexually involved? How do you say, ooh, yuck? Yeah, no.
Say it cheek to cheek and loin to loin.
Yeah. Oh, and yuck to yuck.
There's a lot of t-shirt graphic tees that can be made up from this trial. The man who was in the FBI for more than 27 years, he is Jim Eggleston, retired FBI special agent. He maintained a top secret security clearance with special access to sensitive compartmented information. And he was one of the original members of the Arizona Child Abduction Response Team. We bring you the very best, and Jim is one of them. He's now the founder and owner of Baseline Investigations. And Jim, I see a stack of books. Have you written some books?
No, I hope maybe someday those are some of my books from my career, from training and things I picked up along the way. You
definitely need to write a book. What are you anticipating over the next couple of days? I believe you said, you think that we'll obviously get these closing arguments, and then you think it will take a day or so worth of deliberations. Anything you're looking for specifically? Well, again, I would think that just based on the fact that most juries take their responsibility seriously, and because of the large amount of evidence that was presented over the past, 6 weeks now, I think that's why it would take some time. They may have, made up their own minds. They may come to a consensus rather quickly, but I think just as a matter of practice and wanting to do the right thing the right way, I think they will take time just to, at least go through things again. That's why I think it'll take a day or two. The reading of the verdict should be very compelling. I'm sure a lot of people are going to be tuned into that. And then we'll see what happens going forward, what Chad Daybell and his defense team decide to do. Plant Piggies writes, Dr. Raj, I love the painting behind you. For those who don't know, Dr. Roger Rhoades is a senior therapist at the P.A.C.E Center in Greenville, South Carolina, specializing in dysfunctional relationships, which is absolutely perfect for the Lori Vallow Daybell and Chad Daybell story. He's worked with inmates inside the prison system. How do you think she's going to do in prison, assuming she's convicted, Raj? And any final thoughts you might have?
I believe she will start her own crowd in prison. Okay. I think she knows how to captivate people. She knows how to minister to people. And so she's going to be a prison minister, I believe. And she's going to have the cult of prison is what we're going to see. So look for some T-shirts from her events here is what I would believe.
I love it. Darius says, no goddess shaming. Stephanie says, Lori's middle name is Delusion. The woman who thinks she has a male Japanese name, but it's really Hungarian, is Ildiko Tabori. That's Doctor to You. Featured in the A&E documentary about another dysfunctional family, the Menendez Brothers, a story that we've been following. She received her PhD in clinical psychology back in 2003, and she's been a psychologist and neuropsychologist since 2004. And Dr. Tabori, I know I asked you this last time, but you're a resident psychologist at the Hollywood Improv?
No,
One of them. Laugh Factory. Who's crazier, comedians or Lori Vallow Daybell?
Oh, there's no comparison. Absolutely no comparison. We're going with Lori on that one.
Oh, I thought you were going to say
no. No, I'm going to
gold star. The
way you set that up, I don't know. So, what do you think? What are you anticipating? A very quick decision here, and do you think that Lori has sealed her fate with talk of the storm and talk of wanting to eliminate her children? Is this over and done with now, do you think?
It's over and done with temporarily. I think it's going to pop back up in a few years. Absolutely. But yeah, that's after she has created her prison church and has her own followers there.
And when you say it'll pop back up, do you think because of the appeals process? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. Yeah. There's going to be appeals. There's going to be books. There's going to be, there's always also going to be another cult that pops up too. And this will be referenced.
Yeah.
Nightwood rounds it out here with Dr. Rhoades' words of wisdom. And
wait a minute. Let me words of wisdom is, hey, they're still talking about Waco and they burned down Waco years ago. Don't think that they're not going to do show after show about this craziness.
And that was all caught on film. Some of this was caught on film. By the way, if you missed it, we had Sky Borgman, the director of Sins of Our Mother, who the Netflix doc about all this. So that is definitely worth the watch. A huge thanks to all of our best guests. It's not just a tagline. We've got the best guests in all of true crime. Quick programming note. We've got an all-star panel tomorrow night as we break down closing arguments. Who knows? We could have a verdict tomorrow, and we'll be on this as well on Friday, because if we don't have a verdict tomorrow, it's going to come on Friday. And if it doesn't come Friday, we will continue to stay on it. Until then, love you, America, and love you, LA, love you, Arizona, love you, South Carolina. Till next time.